thanks for joining us. I'm psyched to have you all here. I'm also very, very psyched to have Devin here. Devin's going to be dropping some cool knowledge bombs for us today. So what's I think interesting about Devin is he has access. So first of all, Devin, you're a marketer now officially, right?
Officially, yes. I think day 18 today.
18 days. Devin works at Gong. He's on the marketing team at Gong. But before that, massive credibility. He was the second sales hire at Gong. So not only do you have access to tons and tons of recorded calls and data about how to speak to prospects correctly at different parts of the sales process, you also have tons of experience kind of building that stuff almost from the ground up at Gong and a few other places.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true. I joke that my job was, and my career is very much like Inception. I was a salesperson selling sales technology to salespeople for quite a few years. So yeah, very well versed.
There you have it. So just so everybody knows, it's not just marketers talking to you. Devin's a pro. So today we're talking about, what you signed up for. We're talking about discovery. We're going to talk about some of the main problems and challenges and biggest mistakes people make in discovery. And then we're also going to talk about some really actually pretty actionable, easy to adopt tips and tricks based on all of the data that Gong has about discovery calls. So we're going to jump right into it. And actually the first thing I think we want to do is just ask you, the audience, go ahead and use the QA box down at the bottom of your Zoom window and tell us what you think is the biggest mistake that you make or that people in general make in discovery. And I'll take stock of that and let you all know what you say. Also, we're recording this. So if you get interrupted or have to step away, don't worry about it. We got your back. We'll send you the recording afterwards. There are some really interesting answers that we got to come back to later about that. So Michael Rives, I think I'm saying that right, says too many situational questions. Zane says making assumptions. Michelle says she may talk too much. Clay, not listening enough. Maggie, maybe not asking the right questions. Marcus, not active listening. Talking too much, not listening. Talking too much, not listening. This is a common thread. So a lot of talking too much, not listening is the gut feeling, basically. Devin, you've got some data. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, I'll share my screen. We'll get into the content here. Bear with me 1 second. Promise I've used Zoom before.
Also, Corey, this is an interesting answer from Corey. Too long of a discovery call. Corey, you seem to think maybe keep it short and snappy. Don't dwindle. Don't dawdle. That's the word I was looking for.
Diddle daddle, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we already went over this slide, so I'll just get to it. There we go. So yeah, we already kind of know this. Discovery dictates the trajectory of your deal. The number one mistake that people make, specifically sales pros, is linear thinking. And what linear thinking means is that discovery is done at one point of your sales funnel. It is a stage, it is an exercise, and it starts and ends, pretty much right in that first call, right? And so by that, it's really the opposite of that. Means you should be always uncovering the unknown, or you should always be learning throughout your deal. Discovery is not just a stage in your sales funnel. It's actually a strategy and a tactic you should be using throughout your entire deal, because your deals are dynamic and they're always changing. We've got a great little quote here from Justin Welsh. Stop treating discovery like a static stage of the call and flexible, always at the beginning and rehearsed. The best discovery here doesn't sound like discovery. It sounds like a friend asking me questions throughout a conversation to help me make the best choice.
So Devin, when you were starting at Gong, or maybe in other sales roles have you had like a separate, I know a lot of us know now that discovery is something that's ongoing and always happening, but I also know a lot of companies and those sales orgs still do like a separate discovery only call. Have you ever done that? And is that a problem, or does it sometimes work?
No, I think it's totally okay. There's more than one way to host a discovery session. I think that it's definitely expected and should still be done as a stage. I think that if you try to kind of weave it in with other stages and not really call it kind of an intro call or discovery call, that prospects would probably feel a little confused, right? Because even if you've only bought one thing one time, you kind of get the idea of how this works. So yeah, for the key though, and to kind of get to your question is, I've had sales jobs where, hey, I get an email, an email reply to take a meeting, the first meeting, and I've done a 15-minute discovery and then jump right into a demo. There's been times, which was more recently, host a 30-minute discovery call, make sure there's a good fit. We'll go through some of the tactics in that call shortly, and then say, hey, if this is a good fit, then we move on, to the next phase and really into the sales process.
So when you say the problem is linear thinking, it's not that discovery, the problem isn't that discovery is its own stage that comes before other things. The problem is that within the discovery call, the way that reps execute that is too preset. Is that what the problem is?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like saying, okay, Colin, for this, this is the first time we're talking to each other. I have a list of questions. I'm going to knock them all out. It's going to happen in 15 to 20 minutes. And then that's done for my discovery. Now I can stop listening, start talking, start selling, and start showing you our product. But that's how a lot of deals die after that first call, is because that's what the mindset is of the seller.
Got it. So it's treating the discovery like a checklist of questions.
Right. That's what you do not want to do. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay. So now I understand linear. All right. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. Absolutely. So let's see. What do we got up, Justin? Well, so we can start with strategy. So what we'll do here is there's kind of a way that you can start your discovery call, and we'll cover this right now. We'll go through a little bit of strategy, and then we'll get into the specific takeaways that you guys can use. And so what was really cool is I saw that a lot of the people in the comment box said it's asking the right questions, and there's a few things around situations. And that's the key to being great at discovery. And it's not just having a recipe, top to bottom. I need to start with water, crack an egg, bake at this degree for X amount of time. Ideally, that would work, but that's just not the world that we live in, right? So discovery is not a recipe. Great discovery is a framework, meaning you can be audible ready, you're ready to change, it's kind of fluid. And so that's why it's not just knowing those specific questions to ask every single time to every prospect in a certain order, but really knowing which strategies to apply in specific situations.
I love that analogy, the recipe analogy.
Yeah, it works for me because the way that I cook is far from recipes. I kind of just, whatever smells and looks good, I'm throwing it in there, letting it sizzle and see what comes out, and it seems to work.
So when you started at Gong as the second sales hire, was this and this is a safe space, so you can be honest. Was this a mistake that you guys were making? Did you feel like ever you were just doing this too linearly, and how did you stop?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, to say that even, 6 years into a sales career that I didn't do it from time to time would be, gross misadvertisement on my part. But to go to your point, at the beginning of Gong, it was me, another sales rep, shout out Alex Bassin. I doubt that you're watching, but if you are, he's an amazing seller. He was our first sales hire. But it was me, Alex, and Jameson, our VP of sales, literally in about 10 by 10 room. And we're all taking calls, and we're literally figuring it out on the go. And we know what good and bad sound and look like. We're all professionals. But when you're so new, and I think we're the first 10 people in America on the team and the first 40 in the company, you don't really know exactly who your ideal customer profile is. You're still figuring out inbound and outbound lead queuing, right? So you're kind of just happy to talk to somebody. And so, yeah, that would happen from time to time. And so what it took was definitely some practice and understanding, hey, which questions are getting me good answers that are helping me, really build or define a deal, and what questions are leading to, and this is the terrible answer you want when trying to run a discovery call and someone says, hey, Colin, can you just show me the product? Right? And you're like, oh, it just feels like you just got sucker punched right in the the gut. And you're like, what did this happen? I'm asking good questions. And we'll get into that in a second. And it's all scenario based, right? So it's knowing, who and why are you talking to this person, and that will start to frame the way that you ask questions.
Got it. Cool. Okay.
And so I think we kind of covered that. No one size fits all. To go back to that room, it was kind of like one size fits someone maybe, and we kind of figuring it out on the go. But the reason this happens, and the reason you'll get that answer of, hey, can you just show me the product, is when a salesperson and the prospect are not aligned in where the buyer is in the buyer's journey. And so that comes from a different type of pain. So you're really looking at either latent pain for today or active pain for today's conversation. And so the difference is when you have an inbound lead, right, they typically have active pain. I would say 99.9%, unless they click demo, request by accident. And what this means is, they have a specific problem. They have identified something is broken, something is not working. They Googled you, they went to you and they asked like, hey, I know you can solve this type of problem. I'm ready to solve it. The second one is outbound pain, or excuse me, is outbound leads, which is your latent pain. These are folks that you outbound maybe with your sales dev team. They have no idea what you do. They don't even know that this problem exists in their organization. Even if it does, they haven't acknowledged that yet. And so it takes a little bit different of an approach to kind of open up that conversation and really get that discovery track going in a smooth way.
Makes sense. So an inbound person has already sought you out. They know their pain hurts. You have to do a little bit more work when you're doing outbound. Yep.
100%. And that was the one, that's oftentimes how you get the, and I'll get into, I think it's actually on the next slide here. Yeah, let's just start with inbound. I think this is how I got it. I'm going back to a specific person. I remember it was actually the first call I had. Once the VP sales said, okay, I'm not going to shadow anymore. Go take your first call. And I made this error, which I will probably never forget because of it. To the folks watching, there's a lot of text on this slide. We're going to send it afterwards. So don't feel like you have to, squint your eyes or try to read the whole thing here. But the real key thing you want to look for are the headers, which is, the diagnosed reasons, explore the impact, and then visualize capabilities. So when you have an inbound lead, what a lot of reps will do, or regardless of the inbound or outbound, is they'll start with diagnose the reasons, trying to uncover if there's something going on here. If you have an inbound lead, remember, we've already decided they know that they have a problem. So when you start here, and then you try to go through 2 and the 3 and 4, right in here is where they're going to say, hey, can you just show me the product? Like we're past this, right? Mm. And so what you're going to want to do is go into the visualize capabilities, which is, okay, I don't know, maybe you're selling a ticketing registration platform, right, for events. It's kind of going into, what would help you increase your registrations for the next event? Can I try a few ideas on you? Which is really saying, hey, we agree that there's a problem. I have some ideas as a professional in this space. Can I run some things by you since you're already open to hearing suggestions?
Got it. So the mistake you made was starting at the beginning of what the recipe, basically. When the cookie was the batter was done, all you had to do was stick it in the oven and you were like there sifting flour.
Exactly, 100%. I couldn't have ran with that analogy any better. And the guy's like, yeah, just put it in the oven. Just come on, man. And so I remember that and I was like, wow, this is so weird. Why is he being so rude to me? I can't believe anyone would talk to me this way. And then later I learned like, oh, dude, you're just making like a critical error at the beginning of it. And it was, and now I think back to it, it was an inbound lead. And so we won't cover through 8 and 9. We're not going to get to, too specific here, but again, you can read through these to get to your buying vision here. And then we can switch over to the outbound. Now, the difference with outbound is, and probably most people on the line have experienced, your outbound first conversation could be significantly colder than the inbound one, right? They've probably seen your, inbound seen your marketing. They like what you're doing. Outbound is like, you tapped me on the shoulder. What do you have? Like prove some value, right? In other words, earn the right and then start with pain. And so if we jump back to our graph here, that's where we start with number 1. We have to diagnose the reason. We're opening it up. You're starting to say, okay, what is the problem? How is that presenting itself as a problem in the business? What's the impact? So on and so forth, to get them over to the idea that you have a solution for them, right? Have you ever told some friend unsolicited feedback and they're just like not trying to hear it at all? It's the same thing. They have not agreed that there's an issue. You're just a salesperson trying to push a product. So there's a way you need to go about doing that. And that's with the discovery prompter. See if the next slide shows what it is. Perfect. So a discovery prompter is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's going to prompt a discovery conversation with a 2 to 3 minute narrative about your company, but more specifically, the problems that your company solves. And so it's kind of like an elevator pitch, but an elevator pitch to me is kind of like, hey, I work at Gong, we're conversation intelligence. We, record, transcribe, analyze, right? Yada, yada. It's kind of product focused in my book. A discovery prompter is more about the prospect, and you want them to have visualize value in the first 2 minutes of, oh, this sounds like something interesting because I have some of those problems too. And the whole goal is to get them talking. I'll pause here for half a second.
So that would be like discovery prompter would be like, hey, have you ever wished that you could actually analyze all of your sales calls in aggregate and find the mistakes that you make repeatedly so you can fix them?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
to a
is that
degree. Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. And I'll tell you, what, I'll save you one, Colin. I have it outlined for us, though. I do love
uh,
that you could probably
I jumped
you're
ahead?
probably on week. No, you're great. It's like you're like week 2 of our onboarding. You're already getting it for the new hire. But before we get to that, there's kind of an interesting thing that will help prompt kind of tee this up, which is every business has a set of what we call $1 million questions, right? And these $1 million questions are what's going to separate the star reps from the average performers. And the ability to ask these are, basically you're kind of coming across as a consultant, because what you're able to do is get them to think, right? And some of the ones we'll go calling here to, kind of some Gong examples here of what that could look like if you're selling Gong, which, why does half of your pipeline end up as no decision, right? If you go to, I don't know, any company, any SaaS company, and you could answer this question for them, why does half your pipeline end up as no decision? They're probably going to lean in and they're going to listen and say, what do you got? Because if you have the answer, that'd be great. Another one could be, how do you make your offering a no-brainer? In other words, how are you presenting it differently from other people in your space to say, oh, that's why I went with your company instead of XYZ competitor? And so the point here is, and we never miss a chance to plug Bruno, the Gong mascot on the left side here. If you can answer these questions, you'll win an unfair share of your market because, again, they're viewing you as a true business partner. And most of us don't have these facts. We only really have opinions. And going back to those questions, like why we think, why we think pipeline goes to no decision, or why your reps are different from each other. And then you can come up with, well, hey, have you considered that the truth is actually buried in your conversations, right? There's something missing. We'll go through the three pillars. I'll kind of expedite a little bit here. We go through our 3 pillars: people success, deal success, strategy success. Really quickly put, helping reps become, bridging the gap between all stars and middle of the pack, helping you understand the risk in your deals and overcoming them, and making sure your strategic initiatives are successfully rolled out. And then here's where I think you were going, Colin, which was awesome, which is, which of these issues are you facing, right? So it's kind of that point where it's like, pause. You've kind of done your 2 or 3 minutes. And now it's like, hey, do any of these resonate with you? Like, I saw that you're scaling. Do you see that you have an underdeveloped selling skills for your new hires? Do you have a low close rate or long sales cycle for your enterprise deals, right? And so this is getting people to say, okay, I didn't even think about that there's value in the conversations themselves. That makes sense. And you know what? We are scaling and there is a problem with quota attainment. Hold on, now you have their ear, right? Instead of just trying to go into that diagnose a problem scenario. Then you be quiet after asking, hey, help me understand your top challenges and priorities. And now you've put the tee down, the golf ball's there, you hand them the club and let them take a whack at it. And then you'll be off to the races in terms of a great discovery call.
I love that. I mean, I know I don't need to, but I didn't absorb all of the text on those slides, but I feel like those frameworks are already like super useful. The one question I did have was, I noticed that you had a grid earlier, and the questions at a glance looked like they were kind of like the flow of a discovery call or discovery
That was
conversation.
this one of the back. Oh, it was the back one. Sorry, I'll
The
jump.
top one, yeah. So when you look at, sorry for making you go all the way back there.
No, it doesn't bother me as long as no one minds the quick shuffle.
So when you look at this, like, I know they're not listed like a checklist, but they're numbered 1 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say don't use it linearly, it really means like there could be a linear flow, but you have to at least understand where your prospect is in that flow before starting. Because what I wouldn't want to do is just, I don't want to be linear, but I'm going to ask all these questions and jump around, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would think of it this way: is there's 1 through 9, they all kind of serve a purpose more than just being a question, right? So like number 2 could be framed 4 different ways, right? So you could have a list of questions, and kind of based on the number 1, however they answer number 1, is that because of this? Does XYZ causing Y, whatever it is. So it's okay to have a list of questions. I think the way that people make the mistake is, this is my go-to. I go 1 through 9. I ask everybody, no matter who I'm talking to, inbound, outbound, right? And assume that this is kind of the cure-all for discovery, when realistically, there's a lot of kind of sub-stages, if you will, or really the thing you're trying to do, which is, again, on the left side, like open up the pain, control or isolate it, and then confirm it back to them, right? Which a lot of people aren't doing with that list.
Yeah, I love this so much. I think this is super useful tool. And actually, so Wendy D commented, truly super useful framework. I'm not the only one. Thinks it's great.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Devin. So sorry I took you off track here.
Oh, no problem. Just like my discovery, the presentation has to be Audible ready. It's a framework. Don't always go through them right away. So let's see. Sorry guys, I'm going to scroll quickly. I think we're going to get right to the tactics. Do we want to maybe check any questions, Colin, or be good to jump into some of the tactics here?
Yeah, so no questions so far, but you guys, okay. I'm a little surprised. So people watching, let's make this interactive. If you can, don't be afraid to take us off topic. We can handle tangents, clearly, because that's all I do. So if you have questions about your discovery call challenges, problems you've had in the past, go ahead and throw your questions in that Q&A box. If they're relevant, Devin and I will answer them, or maybe I'll save them for later, but feel free to ask and we'll answer as many as we can.
Absolutely. And before we start, maybe too, if you have, I'm going to share 7 tactics that we found useful. If you have one that you want to start with, go ahead and throw that out there. Other people are looking at the comments. It can only help. And as we go through all 7, I'll try to maybe put a slight pause at the end of some of them. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to pause and kind of dive in there. All right. So I think we did this together today, Colin, when we set an agenda, which is pretty close to an upfront contract, which is number 1. So, every deal actually starts with a contract, which is your upfront contract. And what that is when you open up the conversation, it's an agreement between a salesperson and your prospect or client about what will take place before the interaction. So it's basically saying, hey, assuming that we have a good fit here today, I'm not going to read this, but you guys feel free to. It's like, hey, by the end of this call, I'd like to be, in a position where you're either interested or we both understand that it's not a good fit. To achieve that, I have 30 minutes aside. We'll cover A, B, C. You fill in the blanks for what makes sense to you. Obviously, definitely make sure that you ask if there's anything missing from that agenda, right? You don't want to be a selfish salesperson. Make sure they get a chance to edit that with them. And then you'll say, okay, let's get started. And then, if there's anything, by the end of this meeting, if we have a good fit, we'll move into a demo. If we don't have a good fit, we'll shake hands and part ways. Is that fair?
So,
I'll let that marinate.
If you didn't do this, then the prospect would be trying to figure out like what the heck is going on while they're also answering your questions. So it seems like a basic thing, but it's like so important to actually set an agenda and give them a chance to weigh in on it.
100%. And I'm big on analogies. If you can't tell, they don't always land. You guys can tell me. But it's kind of like if your friend pulled up in their car in front of your house, and you jumped in the car. Now it's your friend, so you trust them. So it's not quite a perfect analogy, but if you just jumped in the car and they started driving, I think in a couple stoplights, you'd be like, hey, where are we going, by the way? Right. And it feels good to be like, hey, we're going to, we're going wherever. We're going to sales assembly meeting. Great. Hey, I'd like to stop by the gas station and get gum. But if the person just drives you straight to the sales assembly, hey, the gum's not a big deal, but obviously in our B2B context, it makes a little bit more sense here. So yeah, you want to give them the opportunity to change the agenda. The last thing on here, I think, is really, really important in the way that it's worded. And so the third thing says, if this isn't a great fit, I'm going to tell you to save you time. But if it is a good fit, then we're going to move forward in the process. We'll get to a demo, right? Whatever that looks like. The reason number 4 here, the last bubble, is so impactful is by wording, is that fair? If they say yes, there's your contract. So at the end of it, if it was a good fit, they've agreed to move forward with a demo. And they're being unfair to you if they don't, right? If they say, yeah, this all makes sense, totally tons of value, but I don't want to take a demo, then they know, you know what I mean? It's kind of that social construct, like, hey, I told you I would do this. I said it was fair. Now I'm being unfair if I don't agree or don't continue.
I love that. So like you're saying other ways to word that would be like, does that sound good? Sound all right to you? Stuff like that. But you're saying that doesn't quite get them there like even emotionally, of thinking that they now have entered a verbal contract with you.
Exactly. I love that you
That's
said
cool.
emotionally. I think that's key, right? Rationale can be thrown out the window, but emotion sometimes is what really pulls us in a direction. So yeah, if it's like if that, and also I think, does that sound good to you? It can come off kind of meek and
Yeah.
kind of unsure, but it's
Yeah.
like, I'll be upfront with you, Colin, about that and save you some time. Is that fair? Like, yeah, that's fair. That sounds good. You're being direct, and I appreciate that.
I love that tip. Cool. I don't know if this is where you would add it. Tell me, we can handle this question later, but Eric Liu asked if you just have any more like clarification on the discovery prompter, if it's about like presenting pains that people in other similar positions or similar personas are experiencing, and where that would fit in a discovery call.
Absolutely. I would say so. The discovery prompter will start, right? So you'll do your upfront contract, right? Make sure that everything's looking good. And then you'll get into your discovery prompter, assuming it's, again, outbound or, we're addressing that latent pain, right?
Mm.
So we'll go for our discovery prompter. Again, 2 or 3 minutes max, and it's a narrative, right? So try to tell a bit of a story. And so again, we're not leaning on, hey, our product does XYZ, because no one cares about you yet. What they care about are the things that you solve. So it's like, Colin, if in our world, if you're a VP of sales for Gong, hey, Colin, oftentimes, VPs of sales struggle with deal slipping, troubling ramping reps, and frankly, missing their number because those things and other factors. We're working with companies, like HubSpot, who had the same thing, maybe list a little bit pain, and then get into kind of, and the ROI was, 20% shorter ramp time. And so what that will do, and that was very ad hoc, but relatively on point, is those key things of pain, like, hey, I work with other people, it's kind of like social proof, especially the HubSpot. But when you use those identifiers, things that you as the VP of sales or you as that buyer persona relate to that we're already solving, that's going to make them engage with the story. They're going to start to see themselves as the person in the story that you're describing. And that's how you'll start to really kind of marry or bridge the gap of, I didn't know what you do, and now I'm actually quite interested.
Very cool. Okay. And so that comes right after you've set your agenda. That's your way to segue into some of the actual questions that you're going to ask. And then this is another actually really quick question from Allie Hudson.
Sure.
Great question, Allie. Thank you. How long should a good discovery call be?
Great question, because I think it's going to go back to it, and I think we'll see it in a couple of tactics here, is remember, discovery isn't about volume, it's about impact, right? So if you can get 5 questions done in 15 minutes and you've got everything you need, it was a good flowy conversation, end it on a high note, right? And move on if you have everything that you need. I would say personally, my experience, a 30-minute call is usually the max, and you'll actually go a really long way if you can cut it to about 27 minutes. People love when you give time back. I know it's kind of a side tangent here, but when you give time back, people are gonna say, hey, Colin, you asked for 30 minutes. It was a great conversation. He made me think, and he gave me time back. It conditions them so the next time that you have a meeting with that individual, they're going to view you as a salesperson as like, oh, this person actually made a lot of value out of that time. I'm more than happy to continue talking to them.
Cool. Got it. All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Tactic number 2. I think. Oh man, whoever's question this was right on the nose. Tell a customer story that triggers their hot button. There's a link down there. You can check it out. We'll send that after. And the way that I would view this is you want to be able to describe their problem better, or excuse me, your story should describe their problem better than they can describe their problem, right? Because then they will think, oh, wow, this person really understands it. And if you understand it better than I do, I'm going to trust you that you have the best solution as well. And that goes back to those identifiers I was trying to discuss. That's a part of it. But by able to use identifiers that they can understand and see themselves as, you're telling a very thorough story that has a beginning and an end with a good solve and hopefully some ROI. They're going to view you as like, okay, this person's done this before, and I'm going to trust them with my time and potentially my business as well. I'll see if there's one more. That might be the next tactic. Okay, it just jumps to number 3.
We've got a lot of questions. I'm just trying to pick the one right for now. So
on stories, you get a lot of questions because it's kind of like it can be a slippery thing.
So one that stood out to me is, and this is, I guess, it's another one. It's actually a step back about the agenda setting. is that something you can just put in the calendar invite or do in email, or does it have to be at the start of the call in actual conversation?
Solid question. I think I view it this way. It has to be done on the call. It's up to you if you want to add it to an invite or an email as well. I don't think it can hurt to do the latter. Shows professionalism in my book. But you have to remember, if you put it in the invite and you put it in the email and then you don't do it on the call, you're assuming that 100% open and read rate, right? Which is, even if they did read it a week ago and your meeting is on Tuesday, they talked to you last Friday, right? The weekend happened, they're going to forget what your agenda is. No offense. So yeah, definitely make sure you're saying it on the call.
And then you also talked about, like, in the contract, you're saying, if I'm not right for you, prospect, then I'll tell you. Matthew Felix is transitioning, and saying basically he thought that was a frowned upon thing to do in sales, is to like walk away from a deal. I imagine that's a pretty common sentiment among salespeople. You have a number to hit, you don't want to have to walk away. How do you find balance there and keep yourself honest on that contract?
Yeah, good point. I'm glad to address it. The most valuable thing that you have as a salesperson is your time. And so if you're working on an opportunity that is not a good fit, you're doing one of two things. You're either going to sign them eventually and you're going to have a terrible customer and you're probably going to set yourself up for some churn. Or two, you're going to waste a bunch of time on a bad prospect. Not that I should say a bad opportunity. Bad prospect isn't fair. It's a bad opportunity. And then you're just going to waste time where you could have been spending time in other avenues, either generating revenue or talking to clients. So I think it's 100% okay to cut the cord. And I've done it myself a couple of times. It is a little awkward the first time because it's like, I should be talking to everybody. I should be working everything. I can close everything. But I'll be honest, I've cut people short like 13 minutes into a conversation to be like, Brad, it's been a really good conversation. I'll be honest with you. This doesn't sound like a good fit for us. And the reason being is, and tell them why, because if you just break up with someone without context, it could leave a bad taste in their mouth. But if you say, hey, most of our clients don't operate the way that you do, it doesn't really sound like we're going to drive the value that I see most of our clients, we deliver to most of our clients. Every single person, I'm not lying, every single person has thanked me. They're like, you know what, man, I really appreciate that. I don't want to waste your time, and I definitely don't want to waste mine. It's like, cool, absolutely. I'll add you on LinkedIn. We'll share content, and then we'll move on.
Anecdotally, one of my favorite sales processes that I was ever in as a buyer was one that I was disqualified from early.
Interesting.
It is the best.
Yeah, I mean, as a prospect, how bummed would you be if you spent 8 meetings in a few hours and you realize like you guys don't even connect with our systems and we never did the right discovery to figure it out, or you told me what you knew. So
yep, exactly.
That was a great one. Any other questions, Colin, or should we jump to the next one?
Let's jump.
All right. Number 3. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones. Get long responses from your buyers. This is key. Let's see here. All right, so we've got some good Gong graphs here. So what our Gong data shows is that long responses correlates with close rates. As you can see here, the longer the customer story, this is not an actual story, consider this their monologue, right? Their answer. The higher your close rate will be, the longer that they give you their response. It'll look something like this. You ask a discovery question. The customer response should be this long bar here. This is how we record calls and Gongs. This is what this looks like. And the reason being is the more, and it's kind of straightforward, but it helps to have some data behind it as well, is the longer the answer, the more information you have. The more information that you have, the better equipped you are to solve their business pain and potentially add them as a client. And so there's a few different ways that you can do this. Now, before I dive into the bullets, there's something I add to this as well. Excuse me, which is, you have your 5 W's in how, right? What, when, why, fill in the blanks. And then the 2 that I like are how and what. Now, you don't always have to get a long response, so please don't swing the pendulum to the other side and say, I only have to get long-winded answers, because sometimes you can piece out critical information with short answers. But for this purpose, the question, if I say what and how to start almost any question, you're going to get a long response, right? Versus
as opposed to like do you have, do you do, that results in a yes or no. And then if you're lucky, they'll elaborate, but yeah.
Yeah, and the whole point is to make it as easy for them, right? They shouldn't feel forced like, oh, I see where you're going, but the question actually was a yes, no, so I'm going to help you. It should be, and a good reason or a good way that I share this is, You can ask someone, hey, do you use Salesforce.com? Yes. Great question. And then, or another way is, what does your tech stack look like? Oh, well, we use Salesforce, we use Marketo, we use this, we use that. Now you've basically, instead of asking, a single word question 5 times to get all that answer, you can ask one question and get the whole tech stack. The other way that you can do it is not even technically a question, but really with a phrase of, can you help me understand your sales process from first touch to close? Can you walk me through, your delivery, your shipment, I don't know, your product shipment from order to ship, all right? Can you tell, nice typo, talk to me about, and basically what this is doing is it's less of a question in a way, but really just a prompt. Like, Colin, can you tell me about, where you got that shirt?
Yeah.
Now you've got a whole story instead of saying I got it at DKNY or wherever you got your shirt from.
Right, right. So on the topic of getting prospects to open up, one of the things that a couple of people have asked is, so we talked earlier about how if you start asking questions that assume too much, like if a prospect already knows they have a pain, but you asked very early stage questions that start to educate them about the pain they already know they have, they might be more likely to just say, hey, you know what, just show me a demo. I don't want to hear about this discovery nonsense. And similarly, if you're doing outbound and you start asking complex questions that assume they have a pain, maybe they'll do the same thing because they feel like if they see the product, they'll understand what the hell you're talking about. But what happens, like, if you just have a prospect who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to open up or just is, like, very blunt or they feel pressed for time or something and they just keep asking for a demo? Like, how do you handle that once you're at that stage?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would almost say there's kind of 2 things there. There's I'm not getting good answers from them because they're kind of standoffish, or sometimes people just won't play the discovery game, right? And they're just like, I know there's just like I've been told this before, like, hey, I know discovery, I know what you're doing, I don't want to do it. Okay, I can appreciate the bluntness. Honestly, I like the radical candor. And there's kind of 2 things. It's kind of off slide here, as I'll put it. I think the first one is if you're getting short-winded answers, but you're still asking open-ended questions, like you're saying, hey, can you walk me through this? And they're like, it's really quick, it's 2 steps, it's this and this, right? And you're just getting these like really standoffish questions. I think it's personally 100% okay to either one, continue trying off a couple more. And if you really just feel like you're not getting value, or there's just like this unnecessary friction, I'm okay calling that out. Now, I know that people hearing that would be like, well, hold on, I'm calling out a prospect. You have to do it very tactfully. The next tip or 2 will be it, and I'll make sure I lean back on it, Colin, with a label. What I will say is, hey, Colin, it feels like you're not really enjoying this conversation. Say it with a smile, right? It's okay to say that you are acknowledging that they are not playing ball. And they'll usually open up. I've done it a couple of times. I know you're going to get this like weird feeling right here in your chest, like, oh, this is awkward, I don't want to do it. The only thing worse is just continuing to try to talk to this person is like pulling teeth the whole time. So I think it's okay to do that. If someone's just like, hey, I'm not going to play the discovery game with you, I'm not going to answer your questions, I've just been like, honestly, I could show you a product, I wouldn't even know what to show you. I have no idea what value you would get, and I would hate to waste your time. So like, it's okay with you. How about we agree on 3 questions? I'll ask you 3 more questions. You give me your best response, and then I'll turn on the product demo, and then I can't promise I won't ask a couple more.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to handle it. And the other thing that came to mind for me is, I guess if you've done the job up front of setting that like mutual contract of agreeing on what this call is, and they've said yes, then you could maybe find a tactful way to like refer back to that and just remind them like what we're here to do today. But again, maybe they wouldn't even agree to the contract up front anyway, at which point you're in the same place anyway. So you can use your useful tip. Okay, great. Thanks for that. That answered like 5 questions at once. Hope that was useful to everybody.
Yeah, I think it was a great call. I should have said that first. You made an upfront contract, right? And if someone's like, I don't care what I said 5 minutes ago, then it's like, it goes back to, I wish I knew whose question was so good that is it okay to walk away? It's okay to walk away. Like if someone's going to waste your time, like imagine this, you close them and then you're handing them to your friend in CS and they have to deal with this person all the time. Like you want great clients, not just anyone that has money.
Yep. Good tip. That's key. And great questions, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are keeping it alive. Tactic 4, perfect timing. And it kind of goes back to what I just said, but soften the feel of the conversation with labeling and mirroring. And I think that feel is what you just said, right? You can kind of feel like this tension building up if they don't want to play ball. And I'll get into some of that in a sec. And the way that it will feel like a natural conversation is avoiding that checklist of questions effect, right? Which is sometimes people call it machine gun, rapid fire. And that's hey, Colin, thanks for the 2 minutes. Hey, how big is your team? Where's your team located? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? And you're just like constantly just like reiterating information, and it doesn't feel natural, right? Like if me and Colin were going to get coffee or after this, I wouldn't machine gun 12 questions at you, right? And then talk at you. And that's what you can see on the right here. This is what our data shows, is that average reps are doing that. They're starting with a ton of questions, this checklist up front, and it turns buyers off because they don't feel heard and they don't feel like they're getting value. They're just constantly giving. Yep. Versus on the left-hand side, your top performers, it's much more even-keeled. They're asking questions, they're listening, they're asking questions, they're commenting, right? It doesn't have to just be your questions. You can just say things along, run with that tangent for a moment and loop back. And so the first one is, I'm just going to move your head a little over to the right, Colin, is mirror your buyer's final words with an upward tone. So this is going to be your mirroring, not your label. This is your mirror. So if you guys haven't read Chris Voss's book, he is an absolute badass, and I very, very rarely call people a badass. His book is called Never Split the Difference. I read it last year. I said, we talked about this. I listened to it last year on Audible. Hopefully that counts as reading it. You can roast me in the comment sections if I'm lying right now. But it was such a good book that I ended up reading or listening to it while I was at the gym, which I'm usually listening to my pump up music. But I was like, dude, this is so good. But anyway, I digress. And so what it's going to be with mirroring is you're going to take the final few words or the critical piece of information, if it was a long sentence, and you're going to inflect it with an upward tone. So for example, Colin, if you had told me like, hey, I'm growing my team, we're adding 10 bodies a month, but right now I just cannot get them ramped up on time. It's just taking too long. It's way too slow. Ramp time is too slow would be your response. And so I'm taking that last part and I'm inflecting the hell out of it to make it sound like a legitimate question. If you do it right, people will not be like, yeah. They'll be like, yeah. And this is why. And this is this. It's like this prompt of like, I'm hearing you and I'm just so interested. So you can practice this to yourself. Obviously if you guys I think everyone's on mute, so feel free to just talk to your computer screen. But it's your number's too high. Your messaging isn't right. It's kind of like, what? What? And it works. And people, if you do it right, I can't overemphasize the inflection though. But it takes away the feeling of like this discovery checklist, and you're kind of just like piggybacking off something that they already said.
It's almost like a way of saying, tell me more, and making them feel like they've been heard and you're interested.
100%. I've done this before. Try this. I'm telling you guys, if I don't know what time it is, wherever we're at, go get lunch with someone and just try to find ways you can mirror them. Like if they're like eating their salad, they're like, man, I hate eating salad. Like, hate it? And then watch them just run with it. They'll just be like, I hate it. I want a steak. I want this, blah, blah, blah. So, you can practice it with your friends and family. Chances are they're never going to notice it. And then when you feel comfortable, feel free to put it in your discovery call.
I love that tip. That's so good. Chris Voss is a badass, by the way.
Dude, awesome. He's got a seminar I think I'm going to try to catch. It's really good. Okay, the next one is labeling. I would say this one's a little trickier. But what you're going to do here is you're going to start the phrase with, it seems like you, it sounds like you, or it looks like you. And so let me see if I can remember with an example. Let's maybe go with the same thing. Colin's, again, ramping his team. He's gotten 10 bodies a month. He's struggling to get people going. And then you could say something like, it seems like you're worried that you're not going to ramp your team in time, which is very true. And then it's the same thing. It's just like you said, Colin, it's kind of like this, tell me more, right? But you can't say, tell me more 6 times in a 30-minute period, because people are going to be like, hey, it's kind of lazy. It's kind of just seems kind of weird to be like, tell me more. So what you can do is say, hey, it sounds like you're struggling with ramping reps on time. It looks like you're not going to be able to ramp reps on time to meet your number for this year. And then you don't have to say anything else after that, because if you've done it correctly, it's just like you said, it's this prompt. They're going to hear it. They feel understood. And then they're just going to keep running with it.
So is this in the mirroring, is this an either or situation? Or if somebody's describing their pain to me, would I use both of these?
Definitely not. Just use one at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, and the way that I'll try to do it is, you can definitely mirror, let them run, and then label. I would be weary of labeling and mirroring and labeling and mirroring, because you know, if you do it too rapidly, people will hear a pattern.
Yeah.
What I try to do personally, and again, it's a framework. I'm usually like a what question, like, you know, I don't know, how, you know, what is this doing, blah, blah, blah. How is that presenting itself as a problem? Labeling that, mirroring that, and then going back to a long-winded question. If you kind of just have this little pattern, it doesn't even have to be in a specific round robin fashion. It's the whole point is taking it away from this Q&A, right? This back and forth, like rapid fire. You want it to feel conversational, which is what this does.
Got it. Makes total sense. Cool.
All right. Technique number 5, ask strategically spontaneous questions. If you don't know what that means, that's by design. Charles here, I'll read this to you. The number one issue I find reps have is not basing their discovery questions on what the prospect just told them. As a result, the questions come across as more of a line of questioning than they do a natural conversation. So you can end up having a list of the best questions in the world, but they won't be nearly effective if it's not natural. I don't think I've done this, but that only tells me that I definitely have done this, which is, you know, someone says, what's the biggest challenge, Colin, you're going with? And you're like, man, again, I'm ramping these reps. And it's like, cool. What's the biggest challenge in your close rates? It's like, well, that's a question, but it's not applicable to what I just said, right? And so you don't want to ask things that are kind of like way off on this tangent. You want to weave it together. And so that's what Charles is saying here, as, you know, if someone gives you a good answer, keep running with it, unpack it, really understand what it is, instead of just being like, well, ask that question. Doesn't really matter what you answered. Let me go to number 4.
You know, it's funny. A couple of these tips are really like, here's how human beings have normal conversations with each other. Like, here's how people talk to each other. And for some reason, when we find ourselves in a business context, we've got something that we need to achieve, and we've got a lot of other stuff on our plate too. You know, we all are busy. We forget that. And I think a lot of this is just really useful tips, like ways to keep in mind how to make it just feel good to do business with you. And you're going to get something out of it too. Like, the prospect is going to feel good having the conversation with you. And it also gets, because of that, it gets you what you need, the information that you need to have a great demo or not.
Yeah, I think that's put perfectly, Colin. I mean, everyone listening to this, you know, if you've got a role or you've ever had a sales role, you're awesome in some degree or capacity because you got hired. Right? You're doing something right. You're a good human being in some facet. And then what happens is, I think, you know, we get the pressure of a quota sometimes, especially if you're behind your number. We get into this, I must accomplish this, you know, I must extract this information mindset. And we lose a lot of these like interpersonal skills and communication habits that we have when we're with our friends at a happy hour or getting coffee. And so, yeah, you nailed it. It's just about, you know, I wouldn't say being you, because that's a little bit of a cliche, but it's kind of just like being natural. Don't try too hard.
Yeah. This is a good tip.
All right, we're rounding the bases here. Tactic number 6, ask questions only an expert would think to ask. We all seen that face, Professor Orlov, as we call him. The best question you can ask is one that let's try that over. The best question you can ask is one that only an expert would ask. There are questions that make your buyer think rather than just recite information. I think there's one more slide. There we go. And so you can think of it this way, is like, you know, we can go through the example, but if someone's just reciting information, they're not learning, right? You're just giving, you feel like you're giving something, right? I'm just downloading. If you ever seen, so someone, let me pick your brain. Okay, well, I'm just giving you information. But where people will leave a conversation and say, hey, that's not just a sales rep, that's a consultant, right? No one says that, but they think that, is making them think, asking them questions that challenge them, that make them actually do a little critical thinking. I think one of the best things you can do is ask a question and you hear about a 2 or 3 second pause. It's not because they're, flipping you off without the camera on and you just don't know it. No, they're thinking. And they might say, that's a great question, good sign. And so a way that you can do that is ask something that exudes confidence, which is, hey, don't say, what's your sales process? Because it sounds ignorant. It sounds like, hey, you should know 80% of what a sales process is. You only need my little what's different from mine. Another way you can ask it, which a pro would do, is, can you walk me through your sales process from first contact to close deal? Now you can tell by me simply saying from first contact to close deal, I'm already providing some context that I understand that this is the general scheme of things. I just need to know how yours is a little different so I can understand your world better.
That gets right to the heart of I think like the biggest mistake people said they made at the start was talking too much or not listening enough. And I feel like we've gotten to the core of that. Another one was not asking the right questions. This is a great way to reframe a question so that it's a little bit better.
100%.
Love it.
All right. The last one, tactic number 7, siete, validate the buyer and sell the next step. So I'm going to read this for us. This is on the closing. So we've gone through our we've done our what we said in the agenda, done our upfront contract, done our discovery prompt if applicable. We've gone through our framework. Now we're at that 5-minute left in the conversation, right? So how do I close this thing? I'm not going to read from the slide. The first thing, guys, don't ask if it's okay to set up time, right? Because what you're seeing is people can say no. What you want to do is be very assumptive with it, but assuming that you can kind of tee it up, and here's how. So it says, what you can say is, based on what you've told me today, Colin, I think you're going to love your product or offering. It's going to help you insert value prop on what you uncovered. Side note, people said you don't active listen enough. If you didn't active listen, that yellow bar is going to be impossible to fill out. So make sure you're doing so. As a next step, I suggest we schedule a product demo so you can judge this for yourself. Do you have your calendar in front of you? Notice I didn't say, based on what you told me, this is how we can help. What do you think? Do you want to meet with me again, right? And I know this sounds kind of silly, but that's what people do. And I know it's like people get that nervousness, they get a little jittery because it's that contentious point, right? All you have to do, I always ask that way. I'll be like, hey, Colin, it sounds like we've got a good fit. Here's what we're going to do. Did I miss anything? Okay, cool. Hey, as the next step, let's get a demo in front of you so you can see the product. How does Tuesday at 4:00 look? I would never ask if it's okay, right? Because you're just opening the door for them to be like, nah.
Love it. Those are, again, like I said at the start, what I love about these is that they are really simple. And so everybody, you're going to get this deck, so you're going to almost have a script. Please, please, please make it your own. Don't literally just read these on your discovery calls. But yeah, you've got a framework here, like we said at the start. There are a couple really good questions, and we've got 8 minutes. I think we can handle a few of these. So this one's from, let's see, who asked this? Jordan, Corey, a couple people asked this. So, and we mentioned this really briefly at the start, Devin, but let's come back to it. So what do you think about, like, maybe in a discovery call, showing little teasers of the product? Or maybe like sometimes, do you ever hold a discovery that then turns into a demo on the same call? Do you think that you can fit that into the space of like 30 minutes?
Yes, I think it's doable. I think doing it well is the key here. So I would say, remember, once you give them the product demo, you're kind of showing it. You don't have a ton left to give, right? Like your hook, right? Like why do you wait for the demo? Well, hey, if you teed up this pain and you drove some urgency around the way we've been kind of covering these questions, is they should really, really want that demo. The best thing you can do is withhold it only to show them later, because then it gives you another meeting on the calendar. So if you're like 10 minutes in, let's say you have an amazing 10-minute conversation, but you've got 20 minutes and they're like, Colin, this looks awesome, and I cannot wait to see the product. Me either, man. I can't wait to show you. Hey, it seems like that, and then you can go into your questions again. By jumping into the demo, you're kind of giving away too much. So the only caveat, and I will do this from time to time, is if someone's like, maybe they're either really bought in, really excited, and they're just like begging for the demo and you don't want to be rude. Or if someone maybe is just like, hey, I'm just really having a hard time understand what you're doing here. Like, can you show me the product? I will limit a literal 5-minute timer. I am not showing you more than 20% of the product, depending on how, complex your offering is. But I'm also I'm a human being, right? If someone asks 2 or 3 times, don't be hard to work with. So it's okay. Like, hey, you know what? Let me show you something. And I'm also never showing the most impactful thing, because I want to show you a little teaser and be like, hey, here's that thing you talked about, but you know what? We're just at about time here. Let's schedule the next appointment where I can show you how we can really help with those ramping those reps we've been talking about. Okay, that sounds good.
That makes a lot of sense. So then, this is jumping to a totally different topic,
Sure.
But maybe not so different. Sander has this challenge where sometimes you get on a disco and you need to sell like the VP, and they've delegated the disco to like a manager. Maybe they don't even have the answers to your questions, but in your heart of hearts, you know that even if they did, they're probably not the right person to be talking to. So what do you do then that early in a sales process if you've already been shuffled off of your person that you need to be talking to?
Absolutely. Wrote a couple things down. I want to make sure I touch on both of them. The first thing is, and I was guilty of this when I first started at Gong, is we had an ICP. It was the VP of sales, and that's all we really wanted to talk to. Anyone else, we were like, shoulder slumped. You're like, man, I got to just go do this thing. I will promise you that the person you think who has, is not your decision maker, you're probably right, but they have a lot of influence. And you're going to want to make that interaction just as great as if it was the VP. And because what's going to happen is, and I'll get to the tactic in a moment, when that VP, let's say manager to VP chat, right, offline and you're not in the room, it's not uncommon for the VP to be like, how did that conversation go? How did they treat you? Because they know that they delegated a seller to someone who's lower level, and they want to make sure that you're respectful. I've heard this on multiple sales floors that I've worked on, where a CRO or a VP of sales will ask that question to a manager, sometimes even recruiters. And I've heard people get nixed right away. Like, a person was kind of blunt with me. Okay, let them go. Tell them I'm not busy, or tell them I'm busy. Tell them I'm not interested. So that's just kind of like a philosophical point. There's two things. Yep. One is go back to your upfront contract. Hey, Mr. or Miss Manager, here's what we're going to do today. Hey, assuming that we find a good fit for you, I'd love to show a demo to you and then Mr. or Miss VP that delegated me down to you. How's that sound? Oh, sounds great. That makes sense. And so that way you're agreeing up front that if this is a fit, we're going to go right back upstairs because we both know that's what needs to happen. Something else you can do, we didn't quite cover it today, but is ask questions that are, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's basically ask questions that they don't know the answer to, but not in a pointed or a disrespectful way.
Right.
So basically saying if you're asking a mid-level manager a question that they can't answer, but they know the VP has the answer, they're going to want to take you there. They're going to want to help you solve that problem. Which is, you probably heard, you sound, or you get delegated to who you sound like. It's a great example.
All right, I think we've got time for one more, and Alex LaTraverse raised their hand. So Alex, I'll let you talk. You're unmuted, go ahead. Or actually, you're still muted. Unmute you, there you go. I can't unmute you. It's not letting me. You may be just muted on your end, but Alex, if you type your question in the Q&A, we'll get to it. There was another good question here we have time for. Do you ever do a discovery call without a pitch deck?
Yes, and I'm still on the fence how good or bad or blasphemous that is. I think if you're doing your discovery prompter, you should have a deck. I think if it's an inbound, I think you're okay. That's my quick answer. To try to get one more question in for Alex.
Sure. All right. So let's see what's a good one. Covered a couple of these. So how do you conduct discovery when your product is a service? I don't know if you've had sales jobs for service or if you've been in tech the whole time. If it's complex and maybe it's not the same ever, like delivery to one client's different than the other. So how do you start asking the right questions when you know it's going to be different in every case?
I am 100% okay saying what I'm an expert at, and I'm okay saying what I'm not an expert at. I am not an expert with services. So I will caveat that. If you're listening, take the rest with caution. I would still argue, though, that a lot of the things that we're talking about will apply. You still need to understand where they are in the buyer's journey. You still need to understand their current process, the impact of solving, or what those business challenges are, the impact of solving them. The thing that I've understood, which is really funny, when you ask the people that I've disqualified, they're typically services because for our personal offering, it's not usually a great fit. So it's a little different. But what people tell me for services is like, no one is the same, right? They're project-based, it's very different. So what I guess I would say is probably the same when it comes to understanding their problems, but you probably need to have an even better custom response to how you're going to solve for them, because it's not ABC, which is the 3 value props we do for everyone. It's probably A through H maybe, and if not more than that. So I would say stick to the same questions, still unpack pain, but then be very specific in the way that you're going to help them, assuming that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I completely agree. I used to work at a marketing agency in account management, but we did a lot of selling. A lot of these questions we used, some of them we didn't, and I wish I did, and they did help like provide a good framework for actually getting to understand how my customer experienced their pain point and what the pain point was. What I found in the service world was that you have to be even more of a consultant. You have to spend more time understanding the pain and then think about like problem solving it, not figuring out how what you sell can solve their problem, but really just like how can we solve your problem, and then how do I do that for you? At least that's how it was in the marketing agency. Again, like I think services, it's difficult. It's different everywhere. I know we're over time. Thank you all for sticking around. Really great questions, guys. Bringing the A game. I hope to see you back on one of these soon. We do 2 a week, so stop by. We roll through a lot of different topics, but we'll come back to this one again if you have more questions. And Devin, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. It was great.
Yeah, you're welcome. If I can plug real quick, just because it's right on cue here. I host a weekly sales show called Gong Labs Live on LinkedIn, about 20 to 30 minutes, very similar to this, very impactful stuff. If you jump over to gong.io and click follow, you'll get a notification every time you go live, and you can see it on demand on our YouTube channel. If you like this, you'll surely like that content as well.
All right. That does it. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's been amazing, and we'll see you next time.